And with that, we're ready to go ahead and get things started. And I'm excited. Those of you who participated in some of the last sessions have had a chance to hear from Danielle. She's one of our graduate interns. She is a graduate student at Peabody, and she has been working with our office through the summer. And she's going to be leading a lot of this workshop, and I'll be hopping in to help where I can. But she's someone who has far more corporate experience than I have, far more business experience than I have. So I'm glad that she can kind of speak to some of that and can go from there. So you'll have a chance to get to know her more throughout the year, but I'm glad that she gets to join us for this. So Danielle, I'll let you take things away.
Sure. Well, thanks again for joining us, everyone. It's good to see folks. So like Brooke said, we're going to spend pretty much the majority of this time doing some more interactive group sessions, because if you've been in career space, you've probably seen there are a lot of resources around resume building and resume writing. So we'll cover a little bit of that, but really the goal of this session is to get you interacting with your peers, thinking from the perspective of a recruiter so that you can continually think about how to reframe the content of your resume to more precisely mirror what the recruiters in your different targeted functions are looking for. So what we hope to accomplish today, we're going to go over just some resume building and writing basics and think about the project action result format of creating bullet points for the experience section of your resume. Then we're going to go out into breakout rooms for our first group exercise, where we're going to think about thinking like a recruiter and reviewing a candidate based solely on their resume. And then we'll talk briefly about how to tailor a functionally specific resume. And then again, hop back into a different group exercise where, like Brooke mentioned, we're actually going to think not only like a candidate, but also a recruiter and a hiring manager with your own resumes, which it should be pretty fun and hopefully not too technically challenging in a virtual format. And then we'll just close up with some next steps, key takeaways, and then reserve some time for questions. But definitely feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat, and we can address those throughout the presentation. Okay, so where a strong resume will be of value. I think basically this slide should say always and for everything. Your resume is basically your chief marketing tool. We know that recruiters don't spend much time doing an initial pass at resumes, so making sure that you have a really strong resume is going to be really crucial for both on and off campus recruiting. Pretty soon in mid-September, we're going to be asking you to push your resume into the Owen resume book so that it's accessible to employers. You'll also be, if you're participating in any of the national career fairs, you'll be asked to have your resume ready for those. And it will also be helpful in helping you think about how to build out your LinkedIn profile, as well as you start to interview and conduct even informal networking to have your resume ready, and helping you think about how you're framing your experiences even conversationally. So always and for everything, your resume is going to be really important. So again, just want to reiterate the resources that are available within Career Space. Hopefully you've kind of seen all of this content and been able to at least start to think about putting your resume in the Owen format. But one of the things that we really hope that you take away from this session is the understanding that writing a resume is not a one-time activity. It's really something that you continue to refine and iterate on as you refine your target and your the ideal job function that you're working towards, and as you build more experiences during your time at Owen. So we really definitely encourage you to get familiar with the resources that are out on Career Space, so that as you continue to refine your targets, you're going back to use the resources that are available to you here. So that's just a quick plug for Career Space again. So in thinking about Career Space too, hopefully folks have had a chance to think about the gap analysis activity that's in there. So if you have, then you probably are starting to think about the ways that you can use your time at Owen to fill some of those gaps. So we definitely encourage you, as you get started with orientation next week and as classes start from beyond there, to seek out ways to fill in some of the gaps that the gap analysis that you completed has identified. So that might take the form of leadership roles within clubs and different organizations at Owen, case competitions, community involvement. For example, a lot of students at Owen get involved with the Turner Family Center. Or it could just be different project work in your classes or in-school internships in the area that you're targeting. So you can see from this little snippet of an Owen resume, this is a pretty beefed up education section that really has a lot of depth in terms of what the student did during their time at Owen. So start to think about that and the ways that you can, you only have limited time. So think about the ways that you can get involved that will best impact addressing some of the gaps that you've identified in your experience. So again, resumes are really important. They're only one page, so crafting really important or impactful bullet points is really important. So the best way to do that is to think about reframing your experiences in the PAR format. So hopefully folks are somewhat familiar with this, but it's a really simple kind of formula that asks you to think about framing up the project that you, or problem or situation that you are working on that you want to highlight in your bullet point, and then speaking to the action that you took as an individual to address the problem or the project, using action verbs that really clearly outline the skills that you used in working on the project. And again, on CareerSpace, there's a really helpful guide to a whole list of different verbs that you can use to highlight the action that you took. And then with your resume, you're really trying to answer the question of how did my actions contribute to the results of the organization? So being really clear about the results that each action had on the organization is really important. And quantifying those results is even better, using different business terms when you can actually quantify results. And if the result isn't something that's quantifiable, thinking about ways that you can address what the goal of that outcome is. So thinking about improving customer satisfaction or something to that effect. But again, there are a ton of resources out on CareerSpace to help you think about reformatting your different bullet points to put them in a really action-oriented, concise bullet with a lot of specific context. This next slide here is just an example of that, where taking a vague bullet and applying the PAR format really transforms the statement about the individual's experience into something that provides a lot of context and really gives the recruiter and the hiring manager a lot of context about what the individual actually did. So in this statement, you could take something like encouraged and fostered growth as a team lead through the training of new hires and mentoring, into something that reads more like mentored over 20 crew members and 2 store managers, helping them to identify or to develop key understandings of store operations, which contributed to optimization of our in-store logistics. So again, quantifying what the action actually was and the results are really clear from that as well. So are there any questions? Yeah.
Maybe one thing I'll hop in on quickly with this is with the last 2 slides, I know that a lot of that was about this whole idea of using the PAR format, or sometimes it's called STAR format, situation, task, action, results. And I think hopefully those of you who are familiar with the concept of behavioral interviewing, or if you've been in an interview and you've been asked those questions, you know, tell me about a time when, describe a situation in which, and then they kind of ask about a skill set like you had to lead a team or manage a team through certain hurdles or challenges. That's where a lot of this concept of project action result comes from. And the more you can start doing that in your resume, usually it makes for better interviewing, because you have those quick stories that you're ready to be able to convey to an interviewer. So just another thing to be thinking about with that. But yeah, I'm sorry, you're asking if anybody has any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, yeah, I do have a question. Vedant here.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my question is specifically regarding the quantification of skills on the resume. So what I've done is I've sort of, added percentages or probably like twice or thrice those sort of numbers. But my question is that when you are quantifying all of these results and more or less every point has some sort of quantitative measure to it, does it look like a made up resume, or does it look very artificial, or is there a way to make that more organic on the resume?
If it's okay, maybe I'll restate your question to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, sure.
So is your question around if a resume does not have some if it hasn't been quantified, some of the work has been quantified. If it looks made up, if it doesn't look as realistic to employers, am I missing it?
Yeah, so essentially, like when you have quantified a lot of results to give a more analytical outlook to that section of the resume, does a lot of quantification make that section more made up?
So is your question around if too much quantification makes it look made up?
Yeah.
Danielle, do you have any thoughts you want to add on that, or should I?
I think you can address it. I mean, my personal take on it is if they're real, reasonable quantifications of what you've actually done, then it is what you've done. But I don't know, Brooke, if you have different thoughts on that.
I think, and I just would maybe say that in a slightly different way. I think with a resume, I think the real situation, the real kind of test, right, is when you start networking with other people, when you start having interviews, and whenever you put anything on your resume, I kind of think of it as a little bit of it's a two-edged sword. It's great because you can say what you've done, hopefully. But the downside is if you put it on your resume, you want to be ready for any questions on it. And so saying it's the same thing of saying that you know about something, that you've read a lot about something in an interview. For example, in finance, a lot of times we'll have one of the questions that students interviewing for finance will get a lot is, tell me about a deal that you followed, or tell me about a recent merger acquisition that you find interesting. And a lot of times you're being asked that question by investment bankers. And especially if you talk about a more common transaction, what you don't know is that there's a very good chance that those investment bankers, that they could have been involved in making that transaction happen. So in short, that means they know it far, far better than you do. There's no way. I mean, they've spent, days and days of their lives trying to know all the ins and outs of that transaction. So you have to be very careful, I think, when you're responding and you say, oh yeah, I know about this or that. So I think it's the same on your resume. As long as you can speak to it, be ready. A number of companies, Amazon is one of the companies that does this. They have a technique where basically if they have you have a line on your resume and they'll spend as much as 15 minutes time asking about that question. They might say, oh, well, you mentioned that you did this. Why did you decide to do that? What was the problem you were trying to solve? How did you realize that was a problem? How did you measure the problem? Do you think that was the best way to measure the problem? Why didn't you measure the problem in a different way? How did you analyze the data that you collected? And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that it's a bad response if they're asking you all those questions. I think it's one way that employers test to make sure something's real. So I hope that helps.
Is it fine if I ask a follow-up question on that?
Sure.
Yeah, so basically, I'm not sure. I think it's more relevant to my personal resume, so I'm not sure how useful it would be for everyone. But in this case, for me, basically, a lot of my work was qualitative. So quantifying the results hasn't been the easiest process. So specifically on that front, I just wanted to know that, you get an interview if, your resume, your resume has a good impression, right? So in that case, if the resume, if I'm trying to quantify it and sort of explain a lot in those quantifiable terms, then I just want to know, if that does not really harm my case rather than help.
So it sounds like, to again, make sure I'm understanding. So it sounds like making sure that you are best representing what you've done on your resume, that it's sort of most accurate, and that it's most meaningful for the employer. Is that
precisely? Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, from my experience, I think a lot of times Owen students need to do more quantifying. Like if I look at someone's resume, one of my most common comments that I make on a resume I'm reviewing is, could you quantify this? Someone says, well, I did this. And I'd say, well, could you use a number to capture, the percentage of change, or the number of people or clients that impacted, or the revenue that brought into the organization? So when you can, I think it's helpful. But I think, like you said, sometimes results are more qualitative than quantitative. And if that's the case, that's not a bad thing to do either. And I do think probably, certain roles, this may be more important. I think in finance roles, a lot of times, you know, you're working with budgets and things like that, and they do want to see some hard quantifiable numbers to represent that experience. In some other functions that might not be quite as important, or maybe if you're thinking about human organizational performance, it's more about, you know, how many people have been trained with the trainings you've been involved in, or how many people have you helped onboard, or things like that. But sometimes, again, it's not going to always be a number. Sometimes it will be something else, and that's fine. I think there's definitely room for balance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we can go ahead and move into our first group exercise where we're going to have you thinking like a recruiter for the first time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the Zoom chat feature to hopefully drop you 2 files. The first document is going to contain the instructions of the exercise, as well as a job description for a financial analyst role with American Airlines. And then the second document is going to be 6 different Owen resumes to mirror candidate applications for this role. And so we're going to take about 10 minutes in breakout groups for you to work through this exercise. It's going to be really quick. Again, recruiters don't spend much time reviewing resumes. So the goal for you is to identify the best candidate for the position, again, based only on the resume. So you'll spend the first 2 minutes individually reviewing the job description, spend another 4 minutes individually reviewing the 6 resumes, and then 4 minutes discussing with your group who you each recommend to move forward and why you're choosing that candidate. Any questions about that? Let's see if I can. Stop sharing for just a second. And hopefully send you a file.
And Danielle, I just posted the job posting.
You did, okay. Perfect.
If you actually, I'm having little problems with PDFs. If you don't mind posting the resumes.
Yeah, hopefully this is going through.
Great.
Okay, does everyone have those 2 attachments? Okay, then we can go ahead and we'll bring you back in about 10 minutes and we'll just kind of debrief as a broader group. Sound good?
And I'll let you all start reading just kind of on your own. And then as you're reading through first the job description and then the resumes, I'll start breaking you into, in just a few minutes, I'll break you into groups of probably about 3, 4, 5. So you'll be divided in a group. And from that, Danielle, do you want to talk any more about what they should do once they're in the groups?
Yeah, so once you're in your groups, we really want you to just think about highlighting what are the key things that you saw from the different resumes that make a candidate stronger for the job description that you've read. So talk as a group about the candidate that you would like to put forward as the best candidate for this role, and then kind of come to a consensus as a group on who you'd like to push forward.
Excuse me, Danielle. Hey, this is Anshul speaking. Where did you send that PDF? Is it in the chat?
It's in the chat, yes.
Unfortunately, I do not see it.
Okay.
Anshul, what I'll do is I'll send you an email that has those.
That would be it. Thank you so much.
Sorry,
Great.
can you send those emails, those documents also to me, please? I don't have them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brooke, I didn't find them either. Could you
You
please
didn't find
send them as well?
Okay, that sounds good. Is there anybody else? I've got the 3 of you in mind. Anybody else who doesn't have the documents? Okay, I'll go ahead and send those on to you right now. And then after I do that, I'll break you all into groups. So go ahead and you can start reviewing the documents if you have them.
Thank you so much, bro.
You're welcome.
Is everyone back? I think so.
So
Great. All right. Well, I hope that that was a good discussion for both groups. So maybe we could have folks or have the groups take turns and talk about, just maybe highlight some of the key points of your discussion. Let us know who your group hopefully agreed upon to move forward with as a candidate. And then what were the strengths of that resume that made you decide upon that candidate? Volunteers for speaking first.
Okay, so our teams, so we believe that the land team, the second one, to be the most preferable for this position for American Airlines, because we conclude that the candidate has the recent experience in airline, and also the same kind of job of planning, and also he or she, not sure, but has a very strong quantitative skills of GMAT and GPA, and also he or her concentration is finance, so it's quite similar area that American Airlines requires. That's why we believe that the long trip to be the best one.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so same with our group. I think we preferred the second candidate, which was Lantern, because of the solid numbers, relevant work experience, and similar stuff. But I just want to concede the fact that we were only probably able to look properly at the first three candidates, and the last three were pretty much skimmed through, and there was a little bit of bias because we already sort of subconsciously picked the second one. So the last three did not get their fair chance, to be honest. So just want to concede that particular fact, but yes, second one,
Sure.
Lantern.
I'm just going to say I'm glad you brought that point up, because sometimes when we've done this exercise, what we'll do is we'll have everybody look at the resume for 1 minute and then we'll stop. Has anybody ever heard the stat about what the average amount of time a recruiter looks at a resume for?
30 seconds.
I think it's
6
like 7
seconds.
seconds.
40 seconds.
I heard 6 seconds.
6?
Yeah, I
heard
think in the
7. Sorry.
career space also it's given 6 seconds.
Yes. It's funny because I've been doing career services for a while, and I swear every time I hear that number, it goes down. I think at first it was like 20, 30 seconds, and then it was 10, and now it's, like in career space, like 6 seconds. It's lightning fast. And if you think about the fact that, for some of the positions that you all will be applying for, that there are tens of thousands of applicants, it's, that's why initial screenings happen just through online systems and algorithms and things like that, and a person may not even get a chance to look at them, right? So it can be lightning fast. So I think that's a really good point to bring out, is sometimes people are looking at resumes very, very quickly.
Yeah, so I have not looked at all the resumes thoroughly, but I was able to filter out by just looking which resume had the most numbers. That might not be the best way to look at it, but because we were running out of time, I thought I'd just look at the resume with the most numbers, and also the buzzwords that I was looking for, consultant and analytical skills and all of that.
And did you feel like the resume that had the most numbers was the best, or did you feel like that wasn't necessarily the case?
In this case, yes. The second guy, Lantern, or girl, whoever. I think they're actually quite relevant to the job description as well. So in this case, it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to add to that. Looking at the resumes, I would probably also, I don't know if we have to just select one resume and move forward, but if we can give another chance to someone else, I would also like to consider fourth prefect, just because he may not have a relevant airline experience, but he's still a very strong candidate. Like, he has had pricing research analyst and financial analyst job for the last 3 years, if I can, 5 years, if I can see. And Another thing is he has solid data analytical skill sets with SQL, CRM, web forms, and analytics. So I don't know if you just have to pick up just one resume and move forward, or if you're looking for folks to interview them. So I would say the next best candidate would be Fort Prefect in this.
And I think you bring up a really good point, which is in this exercise, we're kind of pretending that it's almost like someone would be hired immediately. More realistically, there's a list of resumes of candidates, and then those resumes are sorted through, and then from that list, it's selected who gets to interview. So,
yeah.
Danielle, should I share the results of that? Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Wrap this up. So the story behind this exercise is all of the resumes you're looking at are resumes of real Owen candidates from a couple years ago. As you can see, we did change their names. Those names are not real to try to keep things a bit more hidden from them, so you don't know exactly who it is. So what happened was those 5 candidates all applied for that position with American Airlines. American Airlines is a company that has often done more formalized recruiting with Owen. So they did on-campus interviews, and they actually selected all those candidates to interview. However, of the candidates that you looked at, only one of them was chosen to receive an offer from American Airlines. That candidate was actually Arthur Dent. Arthur Dent was the candidate that they ended up selecting. He accepted a full-time role with American Airlines, and he then ended up going on to work for them for a couple of years. And just about a year and a half ago, he moved on to another organization. If you're curious, like I said, because these were all real Owen students, if you want to know where the rest of them went, Tricia McMillan, the first candidate, she ended up accepting a full-time role with Cognizant, the consulting firm. Lon Trin, the one that many of you picked, she accepted a full-time role at a company called Panduit, a manufacturing company. Ford Prefect, Anshul, you were just talking about him as a candidate. He accepted a full-time role with a local, they're a global company with local offices called Geodis. They do logistics. He frequently comes on campus, so you might have a chance to meet him. But his name is not Ford. Fern ended up accepting a full-time role with Bank of America. I believe it was a human organizational performance role. I mentioned Arthur Dent worked at American Airlines in that role. And then Marvin A. Parand, he accepted a full-time role with KPMG Consulting, in case you're wondering that. So things worked out, even though Arthur was the one who got the American Airlines role. And I thought it was interesting you all gave strong marks to the 2 international candidates, because they do bring a lot to the table.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that was beneficial for you guys to kind of spend just a few minutes working through that exercise. And it just gives you a little bit of a taste of not only the importance of crafting those really high impact bullet points, but also making sure that your resume is really tailored to the specific function that you are interested in applying to. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Again, we're just going to talk really briefly about some of those key points of creating a functionally relevant resume. So knowing and really understanding the function and industry that you're targeting is going to allow you to think a little bit more strategically about the experiences and the skills that you should go ahead and highlight on each resume that you craft. So to do that, you're going to need to spend some time researching the skills and competencies that are required in your desired function area, and then also identify those skills that you already have. So maybe you've done a little bit of this with the gap analysis work, but you can also start to read through different job descriptions in your target function, and then use tools like LinkedIn and JobScan to really understand who your audience is and what they're looking for in a candidate, and how that can translate to your own depiction of yourself on your resume. So a good first step is to scan through your current resume and identify some of the themes and skills that your experiences convey. And then you can also scan your resume to highlight the phrases and skills that are relevant to your target function to help identify different transferable skills for the function that you're targeting. So you really want to do this to develop a really strong narrative, particularly if you're someone that has little function or industry experience. And the area that you're targeting. Maybe it's a career transition, or you're really looking to just build out your career in this new area. You want to be able to craft a narrative and use some of, you can see these word bubbles, word clouds here, using some of the key business terms and kind of buzzwords, and making sure that you're hitting on the key themes and skills that the function really seeks. And again, you're always going to be refining your resume as you refine your target industry. So this, as your interests evolve, this will be an ongoing process. And again, just another plug for Career Space. You've probably seen some of this content, but these specific resources that are featured here in this screen grab will really help you to think about how you can translate your current experiences from your prior background into your target industry and job function. So there are a lot of high quality resumes that are included here in the different fields that you can look to as kind of great examples of how you might start to think about crafting bullet points that speak to the skill themes that are desired in those target industries. So again, definitely really strongly encourage you to use these resources as you're iterating on your resume. So any questions about that?
Hi, I have a question regarding the gap analysis. So basically the gap analysis that we have done is based on our understanding of the roles and our skill sets. But is there sort of a blanket, blanket document or something that we can refer to sort of see the industry preferences in terms of the specific roles? Like say for iBanking.
So to make sure I'm understanding, so you're wondering about, yeah, kind of, I mean, if the gap analysis is really looking at what are the skills that they're looking for that, in that industry. So it sounds like, Vedante, are you talking about because I know some of the gap analyses are already kind of filled out and have information kind of like the skills that employer is looking for. So are you referring to those like investment banking where there is a gap analysis?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, the brief history behind that gap analysis activity was there was a student a couple years ago, actually it was the same class as the resumes you were just looking at, and he ended up interviewing at a company, and he came back over the summer and he gave us a document. He said, they said I could share this. I was surprised. And it was basically an internal rubric that they use to evaluate resumes. So we used that to build the investment banking gap analyses, and then ended up finding some other information from other functions to build the others. So really the ones that are already completed, I mean, that basically is a list of what those employers are looking for. I think, the part that's a little bit more hard to capture is, for some candidates, certain qualities are measured more than for others. I think that's part of what just depends. But yeah, hopefully those that are already completed. And if you are looking at a function that doesn't have a gap analysis that's already completed, I think the best place to look is job or internship descriptions. Looking at several of those and seeing what are the qualifications, what are they really looking for. Certainly also talking to people who work in those different functions. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Okay, then if it's all right with you all, we'll move into our second group exercise. Again, thinking like a recruiter, but this time with your resumes. So let's see, again, this could be a little tricky in a virtual format, but we'll try to make it as smooth as possible. So we're gonna try to break you into groups of 3. I think maybe we might have to modify that a little bit, but basically each person is going to play the role of a candidate, a recruiter, or a hiring manager. So again, we're gonna break out into teams of 3, and what we'll need you to do is identify a person in each group that will be person A, person B, and person C. Don't forget that will be important as we move through the different rounds and we kind of shift the role playing so that everyone has an opportunity for their resume to be reviewed. So if you could share your resumes once we break out into the breakout rooms, if you could share your resumes with your team using either the Zoom chat file sharing feature, or if that doesn't work, then just email. And we're going to spend about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes per individual. So that, again, everyone has a chance for their resume to be reviewed, and so that everyone has a chance for each role to be played. So person A will give their resume to person B will give their resume to person C, and person C will give their resume to person A. So this is the first round. Hopefully once we go through one iteration of this will become a lot clearer of what we're trying to accomplish. But basically the way that this will look is the first 2 minutes when you break out with your group, we're going to be reviewing person A's resume. So person A is going to spend just a second sharing an employer or a role that they're planning to pursue. And now, like Brooke said, if you don't have a totally perfect resume at this point, that is totally fine. Just we'd like you to work with whatever you have in front of you. And if you don't have a specific target, or if you're still working on identifying what that target might be, that's also very okay. But just for the purposes of this exercise, we'd like you to just kind of share an employer or a role that you're potentially planning to pursue. And so then person B is going to play the role of the recruiter in this scenario. And what they're going to do is spend the first 2 minutes of the exercise just reviewing person A's resume. Meanwhile, person C is going to spend that first 2 minutes researching the employer or the role that person A has mentioned is their target. After that first 2 minutes is up, we're going to have person B spend 2 minutes summarizing the candidate for the hiring manager. So identifying the key themes that they're seeing on the resume that they think are an appropriate fit for the role that the individual has identified. And then they tell that to the hiring manager, and then the hiring manager should ask the recruiter questions to decide if they want to interview the candidate based on the knowledge that they have accumulated from spending a couple of minutes researching the employer and the role that the individual mentioned. And then the candidate has been kind of sitting back and watching this whole time. And then you have the opportunity as the candidate to ask questions and obtain feedback at the end about what you've been hearing about how the recruiter and the hiring manager have been assessing the content of your resume and your fit for the position. Is that at all clear? Any questions about that?
A little bit complicated.
Yeah. So when we are sharing the role that we are looking at pursuing, is it just mentioning the profile, like say an HOD intern, or do we have to share like a job description of some sort? Or?
No, if you, you could say, I missed what you had given as an example, but you might say that you're looking at financial analyst roles, or that you want to work at a specific consulting firm or something to that effect, just a general idea of what you're thinking. And then the person C is going to spend that first 2 minutes doing their research on what a job description or an ideal candidate might look like in that field. Does that help?
Yeah.
Could you just go through it again? Skim through it again.
Let me, and maybe I'll try explaining it in a slightly different way to see if this helps. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to break you out into 3 different rooms. Those rooms will all have 3 people, although one room, Danielle and I will be kind of hopping in as the 3rd person. We'll be taking turns in that role just because we've got 8 participants. And what will be happening is the first thing that everyone needs to do is they need to rotate their resume to one other person in the group, okay? So for example, just give you an example here. So if Abhimanyu and Ryo and I are in a group, if the 3 of us are in a group, what we should probably do is, it's probably what you'd want to do is have the person, we can maybe do this through alphabetical order, might be a good way to do it. So if we have Abhimanyu, maybe Abhimanyu would send his resume to me, and then I would send my resume to Ryo, and Ryo would send his resume to Abhimanyu, okay? And you can either do that through email, or you can use the file sharing function like Danielle used within your group. But that way everybody will have one other person's resume. And the first 2 minutes, you all just want to spend a little bit of time looking at that other person's resume, just to kind of familiarizing yourself with it. Okay. So in essence, then what'll happen in that first round is, in the example I gave, Abhimanyu is going to be person A. He's going to be the observer candidate. I'm going to be the reviewer, the recruiter, because I've already been looking at Abhimanyu's resume. I have his resume. And then Ryo is going to be the hiring manager, the audience. Okay. So I'm going to take a little bit of time. I've already looked through Abhimanyu's resume, and I'm going to kind of get ready. And we're trying to do this this is something that happens. Like, I hear a lot of times from employers how this kind of interaction happens. Although the candidate they're not usually in the room when it happens. So that's kind of a new part to the way that we're doing this. But a lot of times a recruiter will say, hey, I've got a candidate that I think may be a good fit for the position. And they take that to the hiring manager, the person who has the power to decide. So to start our role play, I'm the recruiter. I'm going to go to Ryo and I'm going to say, Ryo, I want to tell you about this candidate, Abhimanyu. Okay. And I'm going to try to summarize that candidate. And I may ask Abhimanyu a few questions before I do that. What kinds of roles he's looking for, if there are certain companies he's targeting. I might have a few questions about his resume as I've looked through it. But after I'm ready, I'm going to try to summarize and basically pitch to the hiring manager why Ryo, the hiring manager, why Abhimanyu is a great candidate and why I think he'd be a good fit for this position. Okay. And then Ryo can have a turn as C. So now we're on that second step. Ryo can have a turn to ask me questions and say, well, what about this? Does Abhimanyu have experience doing this? Or why do you think he'd be a good fit for that? And I might have to try to think of responses to that, or point out other things in the resume, or say, oh, well, also notice this about Abhimanyu's resume. Okay. So we'll kind of go back and dialogue a little bit about that candidate. And then after that's done, we'll move to the third part. Now we've kind of done our role play, and now we'll finish. And now Abhimanyu, he has been watching and listening. He might have questions, or he might want to give feedback. And we're hoping that this is the point where he'll be able to learn a little bit more about his resume and get some input on it. Okay. And then, so that's kind of round one. We'll have finished with one round, and then everybody will get to switch. Okay. So then, for example, if we're going to follow with round two, I'm person B, and Danielle, if you don't mind advancing the slide. So now I will get to be the hiring manager. Okay. So now everybody kind of shifts a role, so that and we'll do 3 rounds so that everybody will get a chance to hear each role, and that everybody will get a chance to get some feedback on their resume. Again, I know this is a little bit tricky. I hope that can help. And oh, Manuel says, well, let's do one as an example so everybody knows how it goes. Let's see. In interest of time, well, how are we doing? Are we feeling good about this, or do we want to do a practice one?
Actually, that would be pretty good, a practice run.
It's clear.
It's chaos. It's like a lot of life. And I apologize, because I was the one who I brainstormed this a while ago, and it is not the most. I've seen it work well, but it does take an awful lot of explanation. Well, sure. We can go ahead and kind of role play this. So let's see. Maybe just looking at the different groups that we have. So I was going to, and kind of just did this quickly. I was thinking of having Anshul, Manuel, and Vedante in group 1. Okay. So in that scenario, to do things alphabetically, so Anshul, Manuel, and Vedante, if you all don't mind, why don't you go ahead and Anshul, you can pass your resume to Manuel. Manuel, you can pass your resume to Vedante. And Vedante, you can pass your resume to Anshul. Okay. So
should I just share it here on the chat?
If you're okay with that, yeah, that would be great. If you're okay with sharing it through the chat, or if it would work better for you all to share it through email, you could do it that way.
I'll just put it here in case, I mean, if you receive it, just let me know.
Manuel, I just sent you my resume. Just have a look.
Anshul, do you have Manuel's email address?
Yes, sir, I do.
Great.
Okay, I sent it to everyone, but I hope it's
Great.
gone.
I can see it.
Okay.
Vedanti, I've got yours.
Vedanti, did you send it on the chat? Because I'm not able to see it.
Yeah, I did send it on the chat. I can email it to you. If that's...
Yeah, can you please email that to me? I do not see it on the chat.
Yeah.
Manuel, can you let me know if you have received it?
Yes, I got it.
Perfect.
I just want to say that's awesome that you all are figuring out ways to do this virtually. I know it's a little bit easier when everybody's in the same room, but kudos to you for making it work.
Okay.
Okay, so if everybody has the resume, they should. So first, what we're going to do is, let's see, Anshul, you passed yours to Manuel. So Manuel, you're going to start looking at Anshul's first, okay? Because you're going to be the reviewer, the recruiter for Anshul. Vedanti, you're going to look at Manuel's because you're going to be the recruiter, reviewer for him. And then let's see, and then Anshul, you're going to look at Vedanti's. Is that right? So everybody's moving theirs to the person below them in alphabetical order. Does that make sense? And while I'm doing that, I'll go ahead and start on the other groups so that the other groups, you can be doing this maybe at the same time. So for group number 2, I had Alekia, Aravind, and Jorge. So Alekia, if you could send your resume to Aravind. Aravind, you can send your resume to Jorge. And Jorge Eduardo, if you could send yours to Alekia. Group 2, does that make sense?
Yes.
And then for group 3, we're going to have Abhimanyu and Ryo. So Abhimanyu, if you could send your resume to Ryo, and Ryo, if you could send your resume to Abhimanyu. For group 2, Alekia, Aravind, and Jorge Eduardo, have you all been able to share yours?
Not yet.
Okay.
Hi, Rai. Can you access the chat? I've posted there.
So let's see, I'm just remembering Jorge and Alekia, you all were not able to access through chat before. So let's see, I'll go ahead and share your email addresses if that helps.
Yes, Rick, thank you.
Manuel, I can see your resume. Yep.
Sure, thanks. I can see yours too.
So let's see, Alekia, if you could send yours to Aravind, and Aravind, I can put your email up, or you can put yours up. Aravind, you can send yours to Jorge Eduardo, whose email is now in the chat. And then Jorge Eduardo. Jorge Eduardo, you've got yours in the Alekia's that's in the chat as well.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does everybody have a resume of somebody else that they're looking at, or does anybody need one?
Brooke, I can't download Abmanuel's resume. So Abmanuel, could you send me your resume via email, please?
Sure. Actually, let's see. Abhimanyu, do you mind emailing your resume? You can send it to both Ryo, and if you want to, you can send it to me.
Come again, bro?
Abhimanyu, do you mind sending your resume to Ryo? You could email
Sure,
it.
I'll need the email ID.
Email it to him. That'd be great. Do you need his email address?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second, and I'll pass that on. Or Ryo, if you get it first, go ahead and pass it on.
Sorry for making you trouble.
So Abhimanyu, I just put Ryo's in the chat box.
Sure, I'll just do it.
If you're waiting for a resume, just let us know if we can help with that. Manuel, you asked a good question. Shall each of us say what job or role we're applying for? And yes, maybe what you can just do is you can either privately chat your partner or send them an email if they're not able to get the chat. But yeah, privately chat your partner, and if you would, so the person that you sent your resume to, you can go ahead and let them know what kind of roles they're applying to. I'm glad you brought that up, Manuel.
Okay, so at least that was a good shot at putting that exercise together. If nothing else, some technical Zoom troubleshooting. But I think just based on, in the interest of time here, since everybody has or should now have a resume of someone else's in hand, I think maybe the best way for us to move forward is to have you all go into different breakout groups with the individual that you have the resume of, or your smaller groups. And then since you've been spending a little bit of time reviewing the resume of your peers, maybe spend 2 or 3 minutes giving feedback to the individual whose resume you reviewed, just on the key themes that you're picking out based on the role or industry that they sent to you, that they're targeting. Just give them some feedback on their resume and where you're seeing some strengths or potentially some areas of opportunity for them to think about as they continue to build out their resume. Does that sound like an okay alternative to folks instead of doing the confusion that's on the screen right now?
So in essence, what that would probably look like would be, instead of trying to use all that's down below, maybe what we can do is, so for example, in breakout room 1, Anshul has passed his resume to Manuel. So maybe we can start where Manuel could ask Anshul a couple of questions if he has them on his resume, and then maybe Manuel could give some input to Anshul. Vedanti, if Anshul doesn't mind sharing his resume with you as well, you could feel free to hop into input, or you could just kind of listen. And so we'll hopefully have a little bit of time, and then roles can switch, right? Then we can maybe move on to looking at Manuel's resume. So Vedanti's already been looking at that. She can start giving feedback. Manuel, if you want to, you can pass your resume to Anshul, and Anshul could give some input as well, and then move to Vedanti last. So then everybody kind of gets a chance to hear some feedback and input on their resume. I know sometimes it's hard to give feedback on other people's resume, but I think just kind of giving some general thoughts or input. You could just even ask questions. You may not want to say, oh, you're doing this right or you're doing this wrong, but you could just even ask that other person questions like, oh, what made you decide to go with this? Or do you think it would be worth doing something like that? So I hope that hopefully helps. And then everybody will have a chance to get some feedback on their resume. Does anybody have any questions on that? I know we might not have enough time for everyone to go in depth as this as we want, and we'll try to give you all some reminders about this, just to make sure everybody's keeping track so that we're able to finish up close to on time. So yeah, so please let us know if you have any questions, and hopefully if you want to, you all can find other times to kind of continue some of this if we don't get enough time to do it now. All right. Okay, I'm going to send you all to your breakout rooms, and feel free to let us know to use chat if you have any questions or if anything comes up, okay? We'll bring everybody back in probably about 9 minutes or so. We'll be quick, so maybe we can do about 2 to 3 minutes per person in the group. All right. You should now be able to join the groups. And groups will be 3 or 2 in the case of Abhimanyu and Ryo. Best of intentions on that one, and didn't.
Yeah, probably should have seen that coming.
I should have.
Let's see.
Well, actually, we couldn't finish it. I don't know about the rest.
What's that?
We were actually in the middle of the conversation. We couldn't finish.
Oh
No.
Sorry about that.
I hope you all have a chance. I mean, I'm glad to leave this Zoom afterwards. We've got just a couple more minutes here, but if you all want to go back, I'm glad to break people back out into breakup rooms after the next few minutes. I know some people may need to leave, but those are good conversations. I feel bad about interrupting them.
Sure. So if Vedanti and Manuel are fine with that, like I wouldn't mind doing the feedback again after this. I think that can be really helpful.
Yes. We can end after the main session. No problem.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody else who wants to, just stick around a little bit. and we'll go ahead and break you out into the sessions afterwards, and you can keep going for as much as you like.
Awesome. So just a few things to wrap up here. So in terms of next steps, again, if you haven't already, think about completing the resume building module, which I think is step 3 in career space. And then in about 2 weeks, our new 1220 Owen recruiting system is going to be going live. And at that point, you'll be able to go ahead and schedule an appointment with your CMC coach to do your resume review. So look out for more information about that. And then another thing, in the second week of August, you'll be hearing a little bit more about your peer coach assignment. So once that assignment is out, they'll be connecting with you to set up some time to get to know you a little bit, and then again, start to think about resume, internship, search strategy, those kinds of things. And then again, this is not, resume writing is not a one-shot process. You're going to be continuously editing. So as you are beginning to talk with second years, as you're attending employer information sessions, participating in professional club events, looking at different job postings, continually pull open your resume and make tweaks to that document. It's, again, something that you're going to be iterating on throughout your time at Owen. And then again, just mentioning the Owen online resume database, you'll be getting access to that soon. And then the deadline for submitting your kind of final, for the time being, resume in that 1220 system will be mid-September, at which point they'll be made live and accessible by employers. So that's kind of like your date to be targeting to have your finalized first version of your Owen MBA resume, is that mid-September timeframe.
I have one question. In this platform, 1220, can we have like different resumes for different employers, or only one?
Yes, yes. So I'll speak, Danielle, if you don't mind going back a slide for just a moment. So a couple of things to talk about this. First off, it's a new 1220 is a system that in the years past we've used a small part of, and we actually used 2 systems previously. One where students would kind of enter where they're having jobs and internships, and then another system for resumes and applying for roles and interviews and things with employers. This year, for the first time, we're doing away with one of those systems and just using the 1220 system for everything. So we're actually, in the next week, we're doing a lot of things to be setting up 1220 as a system for a whole. From what I've heard, you all should get loaded into the system sometime the week of August 10th. And actually, hopefully by August 10th. And on August 10th is the CMC day of orientation. During that day of orientation, Heather and Courtney, they're the staff in our office who work most with 1220. They're going to be doing a presentation. I think it's 30 to 60 minute presentation all about 1220. Once you all have access to the system, you can log in and schedule resume reviews using the appointment side of that. And what I'd encourage you to do is to go in and do that pretty quickly. Other students will be signing up for those. So I would encourage you, and you'll get more details coming up for that. So in essence, once you get that email that says, hey, I can sign up for 1220, I would hop in as soon as you can and set up a resume review with one of the CMC staff. Like I said, more details will come on that. I'm not telling that to other students. I'm telling that to you all because I know international students, it takes a little bit more time to do a resume in a second or third or fourth language. So I would just encourage you all to be thinking about that. But yes, to your question, Manuel, you'll be able to upload several resumes. I don't know, there used to be a limit on the old system. I don't know if there's a limit to how many you can upload in the new system. I know you can get at least 7, 8, 9. So that helps.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I just have another question that when we are making the final resume, does our LinkedIn profile, should our LinkedIn profile also reflect the same pointers that we have on the resume, or should we change it in any way for LinkedIn?
That is a great question. And I can give you a longer answer to that question, but I don't think that would be fitting here. I think short answer to that question would be during orientation, it's actually going to be that same day, Monday, August 10th. we're going to have a speaker. Her name is Lindsay Pollock. She works for LinkedIn. She's great. We've had her the last 6-7 years at orientation, and she'll address some of that question. So I think the short answer would be, I would wait until you hear her speak, and she'll give you a lot of good input. And we have some follow-up materials that you'll get access to in CareerSpace. It's not really, I don't believe it's released yet, but a lot of that is built on some of what Lindsay shares. So if I were you, eventually you'll probably want to make some updates on LinkedIn from this, but I would wait what about 10 days? And then after you have that, you should have a little more direction on what that looks like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk just briefly about the internship search groups. I mentioned this last Friday. So I want to try to give you all a quick, usually we have a session where we kind of describe these internship search groups, and we take 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to try to do it in just 2 or 3 minutes because we want to have you all wrapped up in the next 10 minutes or so, or have time that some of you can go back to your groups and finish what you were doing. So in essence, these internship search groups, what it says here, these are groups that are composed of 5 to 9 first-year MBAs. Typically, the groups decide how often they're going to meet. So some groups, it's up to the group. Some groups have wanted to meet as much as weekly. Some groups want to meet every 2 weeks, or some groups have even gone to just once a month. It's really up to that group. And what will happen is, typically in each meeting, every member of the group goes around and shares a little bit about what they're doing in their internship search. They could bring questions. They could share about applications that they're submitting. They can do a little bit of both. They might have suggestions for others in the group. So that's how the groups work. So the group members, there will be, for the groups, in addition to the first-year MBAs, there will be some second-year MBA peer coaches that will be involved. So you'll get to hear from some of them and learn from their experiences. There'll be a CMC representative facilitate. So probably like Danielle and myself will be involved with the groups and others in our office. So that we'll be involved in helping make sure everything moves smoothly. So something that's different this year. We've been doing these groups. I first piloted one of these groups about 4 years ago for the first time, and feedback has been really good. And so these groups have been growing. We do job search groups. We do internship search groups for first years. Something that we're trying for the first time this year is starting these groups right at the beginning of class. And that is a point of feedback that I got. I got that from actually a couple of people, but the main person was an international student himself. He's a rising second year, and he really talked about how it could have been something that he thought would have benefited him. So that's why we're trying this year, okay? And the way for a while, we're like, should it be required? And we're like, well, we doesn't really think we can do that. Do we want to do that? But so the way we'd put it is, for you all, we would strongly encourage you to consider this as an option. The way that we're going to do this is we will have, if every single incoming international MBA wants to be a part of these groups, we'll make sure we have a spot for you. We will not do the same for domestic students, simply because there's too many of them, and the groups they're important, but they take a lot of time. Later on, we'll open them up for everybody. But we are hoping to find a way to limit the number of them so that there could be some mix between international and domestic students. But my guess is probably at best, it would be a 50-50 ratio of domestic students and international students in these groups. So that's what the groups look like. Do you all have any question on the groups or how those work?
Yes, Brooke. So I was wondering if we'd be segregated based on our career goals, or randomly, or if we'd be jumbled across, or how would that work?
That's an excellent question. Typically, when we've done this before, we have tried to find some commonalities when we group members. So let me talk a little bit more, and I'll maybe come back to what you're saying. Danielle, if you don't mind advancing, there's a little bit more on this slide that should come up. So if you're interested, one of the things we'll be doing is we'll be sending you a survey or possibly an email. I just heard from Vanderbilt IT, I was just checking my phone, and our survey tool, Qualtrics, is apparently our subscription apparently needs to be updated. It's not my job to do it, someone else's job. So while we're getting that updated, we'll have that survey sent out to you all, or else do it through email. And we'll have a chance for you to express interest in the groups, basically saying, yes, I'm interested in being part of this, or I'd like to learn more. And then what we'll ask is, for you, what are the key factors for you in your job search? For most people, that's something like location or a job function or industry. Sometimes for other people, it could be another factor. So what I would say is be thinking about that. And what we'll try to do is match people in the groups based on something. So in years past, it's most often been location or a function of what someone is pursuing. But really the most important factor is scheduling availability. Like that's always the trickiest part, is finding time that you're all available. So in follow-up to this, if you are interested in these groups, you'll want to, one, complete that survey or complete that email that we'll be letting you know about after this. And two, we will be asking you to update your Outlook calendar. And that's just a good practice all around. It's going to be important in your summer internship. It's important to do now. So please update your Outlook calendar with your classes and obligations. And what we'll be looking for is we'll be looking for free times amongst the group members so that we can hopefully get everybody together to meet. Are there any other questions on the groups? Okay, if not, and feel free, if you want to, please email me if you have any questions on those. Otherwise, we'll be sending out more information about how you can express interest, okay? And one other thing I want to talk about next is, I mentioned this before, there is a class, it's called Management 6902, Interning in Business. This is not your typical class. It is only open at present to incoming MBAs that are on an F1 visa, that are seeking a summer internship in the US. If you are seeking an internship outside of this summer, this is another possibility as well, but that would be something we would probably want to discuss. This course is a requirement of CPT, which is what any of you that are on F1 visa will be using to receive your I-20, so you'll be authorized to work this summer. So this course is directly tied in with that. So this course, like I said, it's not traditional. One way it's not traditional is that it is not credit bearing, meaning that when you see it on your transcript, it will say 0 credit. That's not my decision. That's a decision by the Owen Faculty Curriculum Committee. But that's how that is. And it's also a little bit of an unusual course in that what you start doing in the course will start during Mod 1, and it will stretch for many people all the way to Mod 4. So it's truly something that kind of follows you throughout your experience. And basically, in my mind, a lot of the course is trying to provide additional tools, resources to international students to help them with their internship search. So really that's not the explicit description of it, but I will tell you as the instructor of the course, that's what it's about. So the initial course meeting will be in August. So it'll be coming up soon. Again, if you could make sure your Outlook calendar is updated, I'm going to be trying to find a time that we can get anybody who is interested together for that. In looking at the course schedule, it looks like at present, Monday or Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. is a time where there are not any first-year MBA courses. But if any of you know otherwise than that, or have courses during that time, please feel free to let me know, because like I said, only want to find a time that we can all make. I may also be looking at a time at a Friday. I know Monday or Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. is not an ideal time because of time zones. So I'm hoping I can find another alternative, but Fridays tend to be very busy with a lot of upcoming career events that you'll be learning more about. So I'll be setting some follow-up information on that. Do you all have any questions about this Management 6902 course? Okay. Like I said, you can follow up with me individually. Feel free to send me an email if you have any other questions. I'll be glad to address those. But wanted to give you a heads up that will be happening. Okay. All right. Thank you, Daniel.
So just to wrap up with a few key takeaways from this session, but also some of the other conversations that we've had in the past few weeks, as far as your next steps, key takeaways. It's really important, like we talked about a little bit today, to take the perspective of others, including recruiters and employers. So I'm thinking about the way that you're presenting yourself, both on your resume and then in a little while in person or in a virtual format. Using data where possible to make informed decisions about where you're investing your time. And then also being willing to try new things and even fail to challenge yourself and your assumptions as you start to get involved in new things at Owen, as you build out your resume and as you just look to have new experiences. And then as we've seen today, hopefully, that working together is really valuable rather than competing against one another. I'm really excited to see that folks are willing to stay on for a little bit to continue to share feedback. That's really great. And we hope that you continue that well beyond this session and throughout your time at Owen. And then also, as you continue to build a plan for internship searching and just general recruiting in the US, making sure that you're keeping up with a parallel plan and having a plan for an approach outside of the US. And then always we encourage you to ask for help and stay in contact with us, with your CMC peer coach, your classmates, other CMC staff, and LDP staff. Again, you're going to be working on all of this stuff a lot all year long. It's not just something that you're doing at the beginning of the school year. Hopefully it's something that you're thinking about kind of constantly as you have new experiences. So with that, I don't know if we want to have time for just a couple of questions. I know we're over so thanks for kind of hanging on here.
Yes,
Daniel, actually, I do have a question. Your deck mentioned LDPs. So when do we get to meet the coaches? Is it when we come on campus, or do we contact them after the Hogan assessment is done?
If you're talking about the Owen Leadership Development Program, one of the days of orientation, I think it is might be the first day of orientation or the second. There's going to be a presentation by the LDP program, and they'll be talking a little bit more about the setups. But yes, there are usually a couple of steps that you do before you start connecting with the executive coaches. But yeah, you'll get to meet the three Owen staff, Melinda, Emiko, and Lauren during orientation, and you'll hear more from them about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe what we can do, I know we're running past the time we initially set out, is I have the breakout room set up for, and I'll make sure I've got it right. It was Anshul, Manuel, and Vedanti, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll have them move into their room. Did any of the other groups did they have anything that you all needed to finish? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see. So yes, Anshul, Manuel, and Vedanti, you should all have the option now to join your groups if you'd like. The rest of you who are here, feel free to leave. I mean, we're done with the content, but if you have any questions that you'd want to ask, apologies for the noise here, but if any of the rest of you have questions, feel free to ask, and glad if we can help with those. And thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brooke and Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raya.